The buying versus rental debate has continuously grown on all social media platforms. So for this video, we're going to break down what the difference is between buying and renting over a 25-year period of time. And the answer actually will probably surprise you and definitely surprise me, even as a realtor. And for this video, we ran a ton of numbers and broke down what it looks like if you're a renter over a 25 period of time and invested the money instead of purchasing a property. And then if you're a buyer and purchased a property, a entry-level condo at $600,000, and what that looks like over a 25-year period of time. First up, let's start with the buying side and what it looks like over a 25-year period and how this will look if we factor in a 2%, 3%, 5%, and 7% annual increase on the $600,000 purchase price. So let's take a look at the buy side and what that looks like purchasing a $600,000 condo with 20% down. And we did add in about a $15,000 closing cost. So your mortgage remaining at a 4.5% interest rate for 25 years. Your monthly payment is somewhere around $2,700 a month. And all these numbers, of course, are averages and they are rounded to the closest dollar. So just to give an idea of where things are at, condo fee, we use $500 a month, property taxes, $250 a month, extra maintenance. And the reason I put this in is because things do come up over time when you're owning. I just put $100 a month blanket for the course of the 25 years. So if you're looking at $100 a month, that would also factor in condo fee increases and things like that. Home insurance at a $125 a month and utilities around $100 a month, bringing your average total monthly buying cost to somewhere around $3,800 per month. Your annual buying costs, if you factor in the mortgage, any operating expenses, which are these other costs, brings it to about $45,000 a year. Now let's take this one step further on the buying side. And if you're not a numbers person, you could fast forward to closer to the end of this video where we break down the actual differences. But if you are a numbers person, let's take an actual look at what this looks like. And I feel like this is what really gets missed in all these TikTok videos or short form YouTube videos. Condo fees, $500 a month times 300 months. Now keep in mind, these numbers will change. And that's where we factored in this home maintenance cost. Property taxes, $3,000 a year. This is pretty high for a $600,000 condo. So I tried to go on the high side to kind of factor in a bit of an element of price increases over year. And of course, in Toronto, we have seen property tax increase. So we try to factor that in on a basically a higher average. So over that 25-year term, you're looking at around $75,000. Maintenance at $1,200 a year times 25 years, $30,000. Home insurance, you're looking at around $37,500. And utilities at around $30,000. So your total operating costs over that 25-year period is about $322,500. So your purchase price was $600,000. Your monthly payments in and around that $2,669, $2,700 per month times 300. Your total mortgage payments will bring that $600,000 to $800,700. Of course, there's the principal component and the interest component, and this is over and above the down payment of $135,000. Let's look at those costs above the purchase price. So your $15,000 for the closing costs, $320,700, which is the interest portion of the mortgage, $322,500, which is all the operating costs over that 25 years time. Of course, these could change, but for the sake of this video, we're going to keep it at that. So your cost above the purchase price of $600,000 is $658,200, basically double the purchase price. If we take a look one step further on how that looks over time, I've used 4 elements from a annual return. So we took 2%, 3%, 5%, and 7%. On average, in the last 40 years, City of Toronto, we have been seeing around a 7%. But if you want to be more conservative, we could take the 2%. And that's why I put all these elements into this video. So if you're looking at a $600,000 purchase price in 25 years at a 2% return, you're looking at a future home value around $984,000. If you take the buyer net gain, which is the equity minus all those costs above the purchase price, which we spoke about, you're still looking at $325,800 increase at a 2% annual return. If we just went up 1%, so if we went from 2% to 3% on that annual return, your future home value would be just in and around that $1,250,000 mark. And if you take off those costs above the purchase price, you're looking around just under $600,000 net gain. At a 5% increase, and these 5 and 7% annual returns, this is where you really start seeing the bigger money being made. You're looking at a 5% annual return, just over $2 million, $2,031,600. And that's where your buyer net gain would be $1.373 million. And at 7%, of course, and this is the average that it's been in the last 40 years, maybe not the last couple of years, but over that 40-year term. And we are looking 25 years out from today. Future home value, $3,256,200. And this is where you're looking at a buyer net gain of getting around $2.6 million net. And keep in mind, your property would also have been paid off at that time. So now the monthly payments would be your insurance, your condo fee, and your property taxes. So that was the buying side. Now let's take a look at the rental side. And this is where I feel the debate keeps coming on what it looks like to rent over 25 years of time and to invest the difference. And we did run all those numbers for that 25-year period. Let's start here on the rent side from a base rent of $2,500 a month, which would be in and around comparable if you were purchasing a $600,000 property. Pretty much the same property you'd be renting if it was $2,500 a month would be about the same property here in the city of Toronto. We did factor in, so right now rent increases are capped at 2.5% per year, and that's on any building at this moment in time built before November 15th, 2018. Now, one thing I did factor in, and I feel like this could be subjective because on the buy side, we didn't factor in an increase in space or changing property. But on the rental side, we do find that every 5 years, tenants typically will make a move, or if the landlord decides to sell, or maybe they're just looking for a different space or location, and renting will give you that flexibility if you do need to move. These are the changes that we made in years 6, 11, 16, and 21. So years 1 to 5, and what I did was take the average monthly rent over that 5-year period of time. So we start at $2,500. We added 2.5% increase every single year. On average, your monthly payment from years 1 to 5 will finish off around $2,814 a month. Years 6 to 10, you're looking at around $3,330 a month. Years 11 to 15, $3,839 a month. 16 to 20, $4,580 a month. And years 21 to 25, about $4,880 a month. If we factor in utilities and insurance, you're looking at around an extra $150 a month. For both of these examples, I did not factor in things like internet or TV or anything like that. Just pretty much what the bare minimum would be if you were to rent or buy a property. Your average total monthly rental costs, you are looking around years 1 to 5, $2,964 a month, and years 21 to 25, around $5,000 a month for a similar property. And obviously, I don't have a crystal ball on what a property will be costing for rent in 25 years from now, but I would imagine at least in and around this range, even if we just added in that 2.5% rent increase. Annual rental costs range anywhere from $35,000 to $60,000 a year. And if you remember on the buy side, that's around $45,000 a year. So this is where everyone talks about how if you rent your principal residence and then you invest the difference into the stock market or into other investment opportunities, this is where we're going to break down if it actually makes you more money. What I did was take the $135,000 down payment plus closing costs that you would have put down on a $600,000 condo and contributed it to investing. So if you were to make the comparables exactly the same, this is where you would take what your down payment would be and invest it into the market. That's $135,000 that you would be putting into some kind of investment fund or market or stocks or any of those elements. Now, we also need to add the buying cost difference versus the rental cost difference and contribute that to the investment as well. One thing that did stand out to me the most when doing these calculations is that in years 1 to 5, you're actually adding an extra $780 a month to that investment. So if your initial investment was $135,000, now you're starting to really compound that investment by adding an extra $780 a month for years 1 to 5. Same thing holds true for years 6 to 10. And remember, this is the difference between your mortgage costs and carrying costs on the buy side versus the rental costs on the rent side. In years 6 to 10, you're looking at the difference now, instead of $780 a month, at $264 a month. This is where the difference between owning versus renting, the gap is starting to narrow. One thing I did notice when doing these calculations, and this what stood out to me the most, is that basically after year 11, you're not contributing any difference between the rent and the mortgage payment, because in fact, it's actually negative. It goes the other direction. So after year 11, at $245 a month negative, that you're not able to contribute to the investment. In years 16 to 20, you're looking at a negative $986. In years 21 to 25, you're looking at a negative $1,286 a month. And this is where now there's no extra contributions being made basically after year 10 to that initial investment of $135 plus years 1 to 10. The net effect over that 25-year period period of time, if you average all these extras per month, you're looking at a negative of $88,380, which if we wanted to, we could deduct from the overall returns on the rent side. So you might be wondering what that actually looks like if you were to invest that money initially at $135 plus the difference between rent and mortgage payments for years 1 to 10. Total rent paid over that 25-year period of time would be just around $1,150,000. At a 2% annual return, that initial $135,000 plus the difference between mortgage and rent would give you a future value of about $510,000. And if we deduct the total rent paid over that time of $1,151,100, you're looking at a negative $640,844. At a 3% annual return, your estimated future value after 25 years would be about $819,000. And your renter net gain, which is the future value minus the rent paid, would still be negative and negative $332,000. At a 5% annual return, and this is where you start to see the returns on the renter side. So if your investment does increase at a 5% annual return rate, if you estimate a future value, $2.1 million, and your renter net gain, you're looking around $950,000 on the positive side. So now things have changed to the positive, which is a great return over that period of time of 25 years. And this is where this number actually stood out to me the most. And it's a huge number when you really factor in that $135,000 plus the difference between rent and mortgage payments for years 1 to 10. Estimated future value at a 7% return rate is $5,387,670, which is astronomical from a return perspective. And if you keep in mind that 7-10 rule, generally something that's invested at a 7% rate should double your money every 10 years. On the renter net gain, after deducting the total rent payments over that amount of time, you're looking at a net gain of $4,236,570. Now, we are, of course, not factoring in primary residence, any tax, capital gains, anything like that. For this video, it's too much to kind of unpack there, but that is a really great number. If you stuck around to this point of the video and got through all those numbers, let's take a look at who comes out ahead on the 2, 3, 5, and 7% increases over 25 years. And by the way, if you wanted more of a breakdown on your particular scenario, if you're a renter or a buyer, either looking to get into market or make a move in the market, click on the first link or the QR code and book in a discovery call with me, and we can discuss what exactly your plans are for the real estate market. Here we go. This is the chart that everybody wants to see, and what are the exact numbers. If you had a 2% annual return on the $600,000 property, you're looking at a buyer net gain around $325,800. The renter net gain, negative $640,844. We always have to keep in mind of that $1,151,100 in rent payments over that 25 years time. The difference between renter versus buyer, the buyer is ahead here by about $967,000. It is rounded to the closest thousand for this one. On the 3% return, you're looking at $597,600 for your buyer, negative $332 for the renter. Buyer up here again, $929,600. This is where the gap starts to get even closer here. On a 5% annual return for the buyer, you're looking around $1,373,400, and for the renter around $954,115. So at a 5% return, this is where the renter starts to get into the positive mark, and $954,115 net gain is quite a nice gain there. For the buyer, it's still in favor of the buyer here by $419,285. So this is about half of where it would have been at 2 or 3% annual returns. The most shocking number here is when you get a 7% annual return as a buyer, you're looking around just under $2,600,000 net gain over 25 years. On the renter side, you're looking at $4,236,570. This puts the renter ahead by $1,638,570. You might look at this and say, well, if you're renting and you do get that 7% return, you are $1,638,000 ahead of the buyer. And that's true. However, that next slide is super important when doing these numbers. This is the catch. If there were no extra payments between the rent amount and the mortgage amount, so if you're a renter and you just initially invested that $135,000, that $135,000 invested at 7% a year for 25 years would grow to about $732,703. Still a very good investment over that time. But when you factor in the total amount of rent paid during that time at $1,151,000, the buyer comes out ahead here by $3,016,000. It's quite a huge swing. And in fact, that difference where a renter is not investing the difference between a rent payment and the mortgage payment makes all the difference in the world. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below if these numbers were actually shocking to you once you actually break them down and how things look on a monthly basis over 25 years. The other element to factor in is that compounded investment and you continually investing that difference between a mortgage payment and a rent payment and how that really makes a difference in the final number. And it does show another good example of how money can work when you keep doubling down. And in fact, if you were to even just increase your monthly payment on the mortgage side or pay down a little bit of that mortgage a little bit ahead, you would also save some money there on the total interest paid as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below on what you thought of this breakdown. I know it was a lot of numbers, very in depth, but definitely something I felt should have been covered in full detail for 25-year rent versus buy. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.